Networking is such a huge part of this industry, and not necessarily just in like, oh, like a business type way, but like the benefit of going to places like NAB and different conferences is like, that's all of the industry people. That's when we all get together in these big groups. And it's so fun and it's so inspiring.
Hey Hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me on the Motion Hatch podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about the business side of motion design. So that means we talk about pricing, how to get clients, how to start freelancing, and all those good things. On this week's podcast, we have Cadieux, who is the animator at The Atlantic. She works for them remotely, so we went a bit into that. And we also talked about how she recently spoke at NAB and how public speaking can help you in your career. And we spoke about what it's like to come from a place where there aren't a lot of motion designers and how networking online with other motion designers can help you. So I thought it was a really great episode. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, Caitlin, thanks so much for joining me on the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Cool. So you work full-time at The Atlantic. Do you want to tell us a bit about your journey and how you got there?
Yeah, okay. Well, I can sort of start at the beginning because I haven't been doing this too long. I graduated college in 2013. And then I did freelance. I got a job at my university for a year. I just kind of had a bunch of random jobs that were kind of tangentially motion design related. And I moved to upstate New York in 2014 with my then boyfriend, now fiance, for him to go to grad school here. And there's not really a lot of motion design in this area, really any. And I got a job at a local news station and was just kind of like doing some grunt like template editing work. And through, just networking and meeting people in New York City and, going to conferences and stuff like that, I ended up kind of getting connected to somebody who connected me to this job. And that was, I think I started in 2016. It's been a little over 2 years now. So yeah, it's kind of like my first real motion job in a way. I sort of always worked in bits and pieces where I could and doing like freelance jobs where I could. And just for the past 2.5 years, I guess I've been an animator at The Atlantic.
Cool. So you work remotely for The Atlantic, right? Was it always a remote position or is that something you negotiated with them?
Yeah, so no. And really, I know that The Atlantic as a whole, it's a pretty big company and we have, writers in all different places and stuff, but especially for the video team, there's no other remote positions on the team and it's not something that they really go for. And when I started the job, I was living in upstate New York with my fiance and I didn't really want to move if I could help it. That was one of the reasons I was kind of like, working at the local news station, just kind of like picking up freelance where I could. He's in grad school. It's for the long haul. So, we've been here for a few years. It'll probably still be another couple years and he can't really move anywhere else. So when I interviewed for the position, I was like, this is my situation, and I'm in this like long-term relationship and I really would like to like stay together if possible. Is there any way we could do remote? And they said, this is not really something that we do, but why don't you work out of the New York City office? Because that's about 2.5 hours south of where I live now and where I was living at the time. And she was like, if you take the position, work in the New York City office and do that for about 6 months, and then we can reevaluate, like we can revisit this conversation. And so I ended up moving to New York City. And that was kind of a fun adventure. And I worked out of that office. I ended up staying there for about 9 months before I finally asked because it just, I was coming back and forth on the weekends and it was just pretty exhausting. And I was just taking the train back and forth like every other weekend at least. And they had to talk about it a lot, because it's not really, again, something that we're commonly doing, but eventually got the okay. And I moved back up here in 2016. So I've been working remote for a while now. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of remote working and I feel like more companies should get on board with it, especially like if you're freelance or kind of running a small studio, I feel like people should just be allowed to do that more. I mean, I have my own studio that's kind of down the road from my house and it's just much better. I feel like I get more work done and I can concentrate more. And also, I normally get there earlier and leave later just because I'm closer to my house and I don't have to like commute, So that commute time, I actually go to work and get more stuff done. So yeah, I feel like it's really helpful, but it's kind of not surprising that it started out like that for you, because I feel like it's quite hard to get remote work at the moment, but I kind of think it's changing. Do you feel like you see like more companies doing that and it's changing like a little bit?
I think it's changing a little bit. I honestly wish it was changing more, because I am so pro working remotely now. Again, like you say, the commute, I was doing like an hour one way commute living in Brooklyn, going to the city. It was exhausting and so stressful. And this is so funny, but I tell, like, my skin cleared up when I moved home. Finally, like, it's like I would have all these like horrible stress problems. And I honestly think the commute is such a huge part of that. It's like 2 hours out of every day that you'll never get back. And you're not using it productively. I get like way better sleep now, and I just have so much more energy and I can just focus. Like, there's all these good reasons to be pro remote work, but a lot of companies still are not open to it. And to some degree, I get it, depending on the company and the type of work. Like, that in-office collaboration, I think, is a big deal. But in situations like mine, I was working out of the New York City office, and that's a satellite office. And the bigger section of our team is in the DC office. And so a lot of the time when I was working with other people on our team, it was still remote already, just from a different city. And it was kind of like, this is actually like more stressful, I think, than it needs to be to get the work done. And working from home, I have more space, and I can kind of like, I've done stuff with physical media that would be a lot harder to do in the office. Like on this Helen Keller project I did recently, I like painted the backgrounds, and I was able to do that. Like, I have like a artist desk where I can kind of like have the space, and I have all my like supplies and stuff to do that. So there's a lot of reasons why I think it's good, but the culture is changing really slowly. I think it's going to happen, but it's taking a while.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a bit frustrating for me because I'm still in London, and like a lot of my clients are remote, but some of them aren't. And yeah, you're like getting on the tube and stuff. It's exactly the same as in New York. Like, I imagine, like,
yeah,
it's just really stressful, and it's most of the time it's kind of unnecessary, unless like, recently I was collaborating with people in an office and doing like scripts and talking about concepts and things like that. And I think it was helpful to be there. But then now we're like sort of moving on to the animation stage. I'm like, I don't need to be there. And you kind of get interrupted more when you're working and stuff like that. And with animation in particular, I feel like you're working away, and then if someone interrupts you just to like ask you a question, it actually takes so much time to get back into like that mindset. Like, it's crazy.
It's funny you say that. I mean, that's so super true. And so, like, sometimes my fiance is here. He has an office at school, and he's like working on grad school stuff. But sometimes he's here, and he'll come in and ask me a question, and I'm like, get out, like, because it really does disrupt the flow. And that's like a nice part about working from home is you can kind of like, animation is a thing where you just like hunker in and you like get into it, and that's your day. And working in an office sometimes there's no reason for you to be talking to other people at that point. Like, your work is just, everything kind of serves as a distraction, and it slows you down every time.
Yeah. I mean, if you're working in more of a team, I guess it's different, but it depends on each situation, but, I'm quite pro remote working at the moment, but I just think it's like, gives people benefits, like to be with their family, like you're already working in an office, not with your other co-workers anyway. So didn't really make much sense. And then, just allows people to kind of, work more around their lives, which, makes people happier and stuff like that as well. So I just wanted to kind of talk a bit about that because I think it's really interesting. And I see it happening slowly with other companies and, mainly forward thinking kind of companies. But so I saw that you did a recent animation with an interview with Jeff Vandermeer, who's the author of Annihilation, which was like about him writing fiction about climate change. And I thought that was like super, super cool. Like, I really liked it.
Thank you. I was so pumped about that project. I'm really proud of how it came out. And I'm like a pretty giant fan of those books. So it was kind of a dream. He had written some articles for like Atlantic.com. So I was just like, yeah, we should definitely see if we can interview him. It's such an interesting subject. So I really enjoyed that project a lot.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, we'll put a link in the show notes so people can check it out as well.
Awesome.
So you've read the book. Have you seen the film as well?
You know what's terrible? No, I haven't seen the film. I want to so badly, but we missed every movie this year. We just didn't. I just saw Black Panther because it's out on digital now, but I mean, we did not go see any movies that I wanted to see for the past 6 months.
Yeah, I think that in the US, I think it was out in cinemas, but here it wasn't. Here
Right.
it came straight to Netflix,
Yeah.
I think.
It did.
Yeah, so I just watched it on Netflix. It was great.
And I hope it comes out here soon. I don't know exactly what the situation is with that, but yeah, that's one of the reasons I pitched that video initially. And I was hoping that we could have it come out kind of like in the same ballpark of when the movie came out, but we just had scheduling never like stays the same. So it kind of got shuffled around for a while. But yeah, I definitely need to see it. It's a little shameful that I haven't, but I've heard great things.
No, it's fine. I mean, I haven't read the books or anything. Maybe I will now, though, after hearing him do his little interview. I thought it was great. Yeah, the film, I won't give any spoilers or anything, but I think it's really good. It's kind of like a bit not scary.
Weird.
It's weird and a bit kind of, it's definitely like a thriller sort of thing, like sci-fi thriller. I don't know. So you spoke recently at the Maxon booth at NAB. Like, how was that?
Oh, it's so scary.
Also scary.
It wasn't scary like during and after, but it was like a kind of a big honor for me, I guess. Like I kind of felt very out of my depth being amongst all these like amazingly talented, experienced people. But it was really awesome. I am so grateful that Maxon invited me out to do that. And it was cool, like, I mainly do 2D stuff, like historically, that's my background and I've always done that, but I've been getting more and more into 3D. So it's really cool to be in that world for like a full week. And like, yeah, and we were just talking about the Jeff Vandermeer animated interview and it's like all of that was Cinema 4D. I was just like, I'm going to do everything in 3D now. So we'll see where that goes, I guess. But that was really cool.
So how do you feel like speaking helps you or the people in the industry?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, for me, I would say networking is such a huge part of this industry and not necessarily just in like a business type way, but like the benefit of going to places like NAB and different conferences is like, that's all of the industry people. That's when we all get together in these big groups. And it's so fun and it's so inspiring. And talking at that is even cooler. I feel like I'm very new to that in general, but I feel like you meet even more people doing that and you get all these, cool insights into like what other people are doing and talking about. And it's just like, it just feels super good to be immersed in that environment. That's like why stuff like NAB is so fun. And it just helps you feel more comfortable. And probably my favorite side effect of doing it is, for my NAB presentation, I practiced it like 10 million times. And I honestly, stuff that I presented in there is slightly different than how I actually made the project. So I was like walking through how I made some of these different 3D elements for an animated interview with David Sedaris that we did last year. And like I learned so much in the process of doing this. And I was like, oh, like now I kind of want to start making tutorials and stuff because not only are you, sharing your knowledge and like educating people, but you really learn it. You super learn it. So that's really awesome. And I guess hopefully the benefit for other people is, I still feel so young and inexperienced sometimes. And I mean, partially that's imposter syndrome, probably, I hope. And partially I'm really young and inexperienced and don't know that much really. But anything I can do to help people kind of get down this path, especially, a lot of women still are not like super in the industry. And especially doing 3D. So it's just like there's a lot more of that happening now, but it's cool to be like, we're here too, and we do it, and we're good. So that's, I don't know, it's kind of fun. I hope people, think that that's cool too, I guess. I met a lot of cool women at NAB this year too, so that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, like you say, like not as many women doing 3D as 2D.
Yeah.
And there's also not that many women doing animation in general, like only 20% or something, I think. But yeah, I think it's just really cool, like what you were saying earlier about how, when you teach something, you learn it like so much more. Like, I think that's really true, because even like doing this podcast and like learning a bit more about the business side of things and like kind of trying to, take a lot of inspiration from outside the industry, for me is like really helped. And I feel like it's, I'm really growing because of that. And like trying to teach other people and stuff, I think you do learn so much because you have to really know something to teach it.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is exactly right.
That's really cool, actually. Because, I mean, when we talked about this, when we first met, like, I was like, a business podcast, that's a great idea. Like, that's stuff that people touch on some of those topics, but there's so much that a lot of people don't know. And it's a little like, complicated and not necessarily always in our wheelhouse to like know all the business aspects. So, I mean, it's awesome to have a resource that's like, this is how the money works. Like, this is how freelancing works and all of this stuff. And it's cool that you mentioned learning stuff like from not motion, because that is a big part of it. It's just business, like how business works and all of that.
Yeah, I think I like consume the most amount of business books. It's insane. I think I'm going to make like a Motion Hatch book club or something eventually.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, I've gone through like so many, and I know that people would get a lot out of it too. So I'm just thinking about that, and like I don't know whether to do reviews or I don't know, but yeah, I'll keep everyone posted.
Awesome.
So I wanted to kind of back up a bit. You were talking about it's really good to go to these events and speak at these events because of like networking with everyone. And I think it's such an awesome thing meeting people in real life. We met each other in London once, and that was really cool because now, you feel when you talk with someone that you know them like a little better.
Yeah.
And I think it can really help people in their careers. Do you think that's kind of rung true for you as well in your career?
Oh, yeah. It's huge because I've had this tendency to I just want it so bad. And I grew up in Oklahoma. There's no, motion design there. I mean, there's a handful of places, maybe. It's basically non-existent. There's not a motion community there. There's a pretty robust design community, but not really any animation or motion graphics stuff. And, when I was in college, like even more so. And I was just like, what am I going to do? Like, I want this so badly, but if I'm still in school, I can't move. And that's how I found stuff like MoChat, was just like getting online and being like, this is the only way I have to socialize with people in the industry that I want to be in. And I just kept doing that. And I've always done it. And, that's why I'm like on the motion Slack all the time. Like I always end up living in places where there's not really a big motion community. There's not really one here upstate New York either. And in New York City, I had kind of that like almost a year of being in that environment, but it just wasn't a long-term thing. And I think it's the only reason that I've been able to get where it was just because I like was, working on it and like working on projects and teaching myself and all of this stuff, but also like talking to people and getting involved and showing my interest. And I was super, super fortunate that, I ended up getting this job basically through a connection I made going to a conference, like online. It's huge. Like I would not be where I was without that. And I think sometimes, there are people who aren't that involved in the online community and they do really well. But it depends on what you're doing. And for me, coming up out of the middle of nowhere and primarily self-teaching all of this stuff, that's the avenue that I had to take, I think, to actually break into the industry. And I highly recommend it for people doing it now. I think, as you progress in your career, it's more of like a word of mouth thing. And I guess maybe that's like your networking paying off in the long term. And not only that too, but just you get personal benefits too. Like you learn from the best people and you get to like make awesome friends who all like love the same stuff you do. So there's not just business reasons to it. But I for sure think it's invaluable to some degree. You kind of want to socialize with all of the people who are doing this stuff.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know how we met. I think it was like through Twitter or something. But
I think it must have been, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there's like loads of motion designers on Twitter. And then now I'm like, are they moving elsewhere? Like, I'm not sure. Like, obviously, you have the motion design Slack, which you're on all the time. I wanted to ask you, like, how, I don't know, like, how you're juggling all this stuff, you know, but do you think there's anywhere else that is kind of like a motion design community coming up, like maybe Instagram? I'm not sure. What do you think?
That's a good question. And I see people, I think there are like different schools of thought because Twitter, I think, is where it all started. And a lot of people are still on there, maybe less so. I think the motion design Slack took a big chunk out of that, of like how many people are just like active on a daily basis on Twitter. And Instagram is a big thing, but it's hard to me to see Instagram as a community a lot of the time, depending on how you use it, I guess. But I don't really it's not really a place for conversation to me. Like, I don't really comment on people's stuff. And I think people see it as kind of a portfolio supplement. But even then, like, I don't use it that way. And then there's been debates you see online where people are like, you have to be on Instagram and you have to post all your stuff on Instagram. And it's what everybody's looking at now. And I don't know if that's true or not. I see, some people are like, yeah, I look at Instagram to hire people. And some people are like, I don't know. And with the algorithms always changing, I feel like it's a little bit of a gamble in the first place to get seen and stuff like that. So we're kind of everywhere, I guess. I feel like I'm more pro Twitter because there's more of like a conversational aspect to it. And before the Slack was a thing, like I used to, if I had a software problem or something, I would tweet about it and just like hope, somebody would see it and would like throw me a bone. And I think that's what places like the Motion Slack are good for, is that kind of like we're having a dialogue and we're like talking about work and people share business tips and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of all over the place though.
Yeah, I feel like I know what you mean. Like the problem with Instagram is it's like mainly image based. But I think it's good in the way that if you're using it in a different way, like you're kind of, providing the people who follow you with something like either education or like they're your fans, so they like your work, or like if you're thinking about it in different ways, I think you can get a lot out of it. And then also I wanted to say about Twitter, I find it like so hard to follow along with conversations on Twitter sometimes. It's like crazy. Like the MoChat stuff, like I'm always asleep when it happens, which is a massive shame. But also I try and like go back through people's conversations and like hours later and you're just like, where is this going? Like what's happening? And there's just like, you'll like come in like mid-tweet or something. So I think it's weird. And I think the Motion Slack is much better for that. But then also that is like really kind of heavily populated in some channels. Yeah. And I just like feel like I can't keep up. I started following like the business time one just to be like, oh, maybe I can like jump in and like help some people. But it's like really hard to just keep up with it. And then obviously a lot of people in the US are on it. So sometimes it's like in the middle of the night and I'll wake up and I'll just have like a ton of messages. And
I do. Yeah. Like I know we have like UK people and European people on there, but I do think the vast majority are probably US based. And it is like, none of it is like really permanent. Like this, even the Slack conversations, they can be more in depth, but they're still pretty fleeting. And, if you're not there while it's happening, you're just going to miss the whole conversation, really. Like you can go back and read it, but like there are things I like about that, but it's not as permanent. And speaking of like online communities and stuff, I mean, there's places like Mixed Parts, which is like a more of a forum. And then it's a little more like static in the conversation. It's there and you can see it. But like I have a hard time reading the kind of like Reddit style of posts with like upvoting and stuff. And I just never really look at it. There's really good conversations on there. If somebody like tweets about a good conversation that's happening on Mixed Parts, I'll read it. But I very rarely visit it on my own.
Yeah, and like obviously we have like a Motion Hatch Facebook group. If anyone wants to join that, just putting it in there, little plug. But where it's just kind of easier, I think, sometimes on Facebook because you get the notifications like when you go on there. So, and I'd much rather be in there than just looking at like some, I don't know, random person stuff. At least it's like you go on Facebook, it's something useful rather than you go on Facebook and just see like your friends' holiday pictures. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Obviously,
agree,
you see that
actually.
too.
And I like reading the Motion Hatch posts. If somebody's like, I have a specific question about this business thing that happened, and then I can see
Yeah.
like all of the people that have responded and like have different. I that format I like. It's a little bit easier to just like figure out what's going on. Like, oh, here's a question. Like, here's the answer, probably.
Yeah. And you can search it too, I think. But I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about future ways to do that sort of thing and make it better. So, have you learned anything in the past 5 years that has benefited or changed your life? And it doesn't have to be motion design related.
This is a great question. Well, we've kind of talked about this a lot, but honestly, I'm all about it. So I guess I'll just kind of get into it even further. But it like putting yourself out there, people, I think, like I'm honestly pretty introverted. Like I really like that's why remote work suits me really well. I think it's like I like being, home and chill and just kind of like having my time and being able to focus. But like cultivating an extroverted side is really beneficial in a lot of ways. And sometimes it can be really hard and sometimes it can be kind of weird. But for example, like I constantly ask people that I've never met before if they want to hang out and, if you want to get coffee or whatever. And like not a lot of people do that, I don't think. I mean, sometimes people will, ask a peer out to coffee or something to like talk about work stuff, but I try to make a habit of it whenever I'm in a city and I know there's a lot of motion people. I'm like, who wants to hang out? Like, let's talk. And you meet so many cool people that way and people want to talk to you about this stuff. Like we all love the same thing. So that's like a piece of advice that I try to give a lot of people because it's very easy to not do that. And it doesn't maybe seem like it makes that much of a difference, but it really does. Like I've met some of my best friends. Like I had a friend here, she doesn't live in Troy anymore, but I found her portfolio online and it was just like she's a 2D artist. And I was looking for jobs, I think. And then I found the company she worked for. And then I just like found her website and I was like, oh, like I love all this work. And I sent her an email and was like, do you just want to like get coffee and talk about art? And she said, yeah. And she was definitely a little weirded out by it, I think. But like, we're still really good friends. And it was just like a very random thing. And nothing really bad has ever happened to me from doing that. I'm sure it could, but it's, just like you need to, put yourself out there. Like this shared passion is like a really good icebreaker to meet people. And, maybe worst case scenario, you meet somebody you don't get along with, or they say no, or they don't respond to you. But that's something I think that like there's so many places I wouldn't be, like people I wouldn't know if I didn't make a habit of doing that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I was just thinking like, I wonder like sometimes if people find it like more intense to meet people one-on-one. I mean, I like it as long as I think like, am I in a public space, like
Right.
safety first, everyone. But, like obviously most motion designers are fine, but you never know. But that's just me with my like paranoid mind. But
I mean, it was, don't invite them to your apartment or anything like the
yeah,
first
exactly.
time.
Just in case we have to clarify that for anyone. But yeah, I was wondering whether people might think that was a bit intense. So maybe like having more like group meetups helps. Like I know that I recently did one for Motion Hatch in London and that went really well. And I really enjoyed that because it was like a group of people and everyone like talking to each other. But it was kind of still small enough that, people didn't feel too intimidated. So I thought that was really good. Like if people were too scared to kind of just reach out to people individually, that
Totally.
they can go to like different little kind of motion meetups. And I think I see different ones like happening all over the place. And that's another thing about NEBs. I missed like the School of Motion, MoGraph Mentor, Grayscale Gorilla, the Future meetup. And I was like, oh man, I really wanted to go to that.
And it was pretty awesome. That was a pretty sweet, it's just like amazing to see all of these people that like from the online community and Twitter and stuff. And it's like, everybody's here. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, it seemed really good.
Cool. Next year, I'm sure they're going to do it again.
Yeah, I definitely want to be involved next year for sure. So what's one thing that you hope the audience can take away from this episode?
I hope, well, honestly, I do. I hope I can't encourage people enough to like go hang out with people and talk to people and get involved. even if you are just like a big part of the online community to me for a long time, and even still now, is asking for help. Like, I want to contribute and offer as much as I can and help other people too. But like, I don't have like coworkers in the same office with me where I can be like, I'm struggling with this animation thing. Somebody help me. So like, I heavily rely on the Motion Slack and stuff like that for that. It's invaluable. It's just another way for you to learn even more. And, ideally you're always like learning and like thirsty for knowledge and that kind of thing. And yeah, just to like put yourself out there and not be afraid of visibility. I think if you are approached for a speaking opportunity, you should definitely take it no matter how you feel about it. And if you're nervous, especially if you're nervous, you should do that. It's basically all about participating in the community and giving back when you can and just being active.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've done like a few speaking things recently, and every time it gets easier, which is quite cool because you're like,
so does. I mean, it's really scary. It is so scary. Like, and I will say, I was sweating bullets the whole week up to my NAB presentation was like the last day, and I was agonizing over it. And then I did it, and I was like, oh, this is not that bad, actually. I mean, it helps that practice. Practice really eased my fears a lot, but it really isn't as hard once you get started. Like a bit of comforting advice, I guess, of people who are like nervous to do it. And like once you're in the moment and you realize that you're basically just talking to yourself in a lot of ways, like you look out in the audience and it's just like people that are all just as like nerdy about this stuff as you are and like are there for that, it gets a lot easier.
Yeah, I think maybe like the first 5 minutes is probably the most nerve-wracking. Yeah. And then after that, it's fine.
Oh my God. If you look at my NAB talk, it's like recorded and the mic is like this really goofy kind of headset thing. And it like, my hair's all weird. And it cracks me up because I just like open it up. I was like, oh, neat. And the only time you ever really see me on camera, I have this weird hair thing going on. But whatever, man, it was not a big deal. And then, I'm like, you can tell I'm nervous at the beginning too, kind of. And I'm like, here I am, Caitlin. But at least I thought I skipped like 10 minutes ahead or whatever. And I was like, nah, it's fine. Like, I'm just doing it. It just goes away. You just got to get through those 5 crucial minutes and fix your hair, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure your hair was like totally fine.
You couldn't see it from one angle. So as long as I had my head turned slightly, it was all good.
That's good. But everyone always thinks that, like, they're like, oh, my hair, my nose, my whatever. And you're like, it doesn't matter who you are. And it's like,
so true.
No one cares.
Yeah, nobody's thinking about it. A lot of the times people don't even notice whatever it is that you like might be worried about. Yeah, and that's I think you just have to do it before you like really get that. But it's definitely true.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good to talk about this stuff as well, because I think people think like, oh no, I can never do that kind of thing. And I've thought that so many times, and doing this podcast and starting Motion Hatch and things like that, I was like, oh, I could never do a podcast,
Now you're crushing it. Now you're crushing this podcast. And that's true. It's a business thing too, really. It's like, how do you relate to your community and like just learning how to do a public speaking of any kind it's a good skill to have. Yeah, it is intimidating, but it's good for you. You get to go out and meet people and you get to like help people. And that, that can come back to you in a positive way as well. So it's definitely a good thing to practice and to say yes when people are like, do you want to talk at my thing?
Yeah. And I feel like it's, that thing of like you're giving other people knowledge. If someone's asking you to speak, you're giving other people knowledge, which is awesome if you think of it like that. Because everyone always thinks like, oh, it's about me. Like, but no, you should be thinking about what can I give the audience so they can take something away from this, so they can get something out of it.
Totally. And it's funny you say that. Like when I was doing the NAB talk, I'm like, I haven't been doing this as long as all of these people. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I felt pretty good about doing it because, and one of the things that made it so exciting, honestly, was the only other time I've been to NAB was in 2014. It was a few years ago. And I didn't know anything about anything. And I like spent basically the entire time like stalking the Maxon booth and just like eating up all of the Cinema 4D tutorials. And I'd never used it before. And so it was really cool, like the way I framed it, because I was like, what am I going to talk about? Like I use this software, but I don't feel like I'm like a wizard at it. But I was like, there are people out there who are probably just like I was, like this tiny youth who doesn't know how to do this, but is interested. And like, I could talk to them about it. I can be like, literally, this is what you need to do to get started. And it's so easy and it's really fun. And that also made it a lot easier. It's like, I'm not worrying about like, I don't have like a cool Nike campaign or something to show, but there's like an audience out there that's similar to how I was not too long ago. And that's who I want to talk to. And that's kind of how I framed it all around. And even if you're not super duper experienced and like crushing it every day on like crazy agency jobs, like you might still have a lot of valuable things to say to people. It's very rarely do people not have some valuable piece of advice or something that they can impart to the community. And thinking about it that way can help a lot. Definitely.
Yeah, I think like you only have to be like one step ahead of someone to kind of turn around and teach them, right? Which I always think about that. I think it's such a nice way of thinking about it. And also, I think like maybe you're more relatable to someone than the person with the big Nike campaign,
Right.
Like, you see what I mean? Like they might be like, oh, I relate to Caitlin because she's like me. And then that inspires someone else. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Cool. So, I mean, it's been a pleasure to chat to you today. I think we like went slightly off topic, but I thought it was really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love Motion Hatch, so this is pretty cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So, where can the audience find you and your work?
Everywhere online, I am Kate Cadieux. I don't go by Kate. I go by Caitlin, but for some reason, that's my handle. I'm going to spell it really quickly because it's a kind of a spelling trap. It's CaitCadieux. And you can katecadieux.com. Like I'm at Kate Cadieux on Twitter and Instagram, all that good stuff. So katecadieux@gmail.com is my email if anybody ever wants to write me an email for any reason. Or if you're in upstate New York, drop me a line. We can get coffee or something.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll put all your links in the show notes anyway, so people can find you easily.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Caitlin for coming on the show. It was super cool to chat to her. I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought she gave some really, really great insight. If you enjoyed this episode and you thought it was helpful, then if you could hop over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review, that really helps get the show out there. Also, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can always hit us up at Motion Hatch on Twitter and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for listening. See ya.